Hello, my name is Casey Clark, and I am just going, before I get into the details about this week's assignment in Top 2 Week 4, I just want to go over a couple elements that I believe are important in order to actually understand the question that I'm reporting on. Okay, so the task that we were assigned was to read up about Snyderman's 8 golden rules for human-computer interaction. We watched a skit that students had made. It was posted on YouTube and demonstrating do's and don'ts applying these rules. And we are to think about this skit as a potential authentic learning exercise. So, just to give a bit of an overview about the course itself, I had to do a little bit of investigative work, but I think it was worth it because it allowed me to be able to assess a couple things a little bit better. So the actual course in question is called INFR 4350, Virtual Reality and User Interaction. So this is a 4th year course, and it was offered at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. Now, I read up about the course description, and there was definitely an important element about discussing the novel interaction of technology and ways of getting feedback from players and users of interactive systems. So I think that's important to recognize that we actually know what the the course learning objectives were as we go forward. All right, so wondering a little bit about the history of this assignment, because it is essentially it's like a skit where students are acting out these these elements, if you will, of how human and computer interaction is either made better or worse. And so I was just wondering, what even provoked them to do that? So I looked a little bit up on YouTube, and I found other similar videos from other students. So it seemed like it was likely a group project. None of the groups actually used computers, so it was probably part of the rule on that. And they all had different interpretations of it, and they all produced videos, and some of them actually have 5,000 views, so some of them were pretty effective. Okay. All right, so next, before I go on, I just need to talk a little bit about another case study that we were to read in week 4, which was about authentic learning and mock trials. Okay, so the article was entitled Putting Authentic Learning on Trial, Using Trials as a Pedagogical Model for Teaching in the Humanities. So this was written by Dr. Jessica Riddell at Bishop University, and it was a project that she did, a one-off project in which her students in law and history collaborated to produce a mock trial to actually try Shakespeare for plagiarism under the Criminal Court of Canada. So, pretty interesting idea, very involved. I watched the output video, which was an hour and a half. You had a lot of engagement with, there were just other students and people that were watching, people that were cheering on either side, and then you had students that actually had to do some inquiry about the character that they were playing, work with people, learn their specific character, whatever that happened to be, Shakespeare, an investigator, Anne Hathaway, the wife of Shakespeare, for example. And so they all kind of had their role, and they had to do investigative work, and it was really neat to sort of see it all come together. All right, so now I will move along to authentic learning and discuss how these two case studies, what they actually had in common. All right, so, and pardon me if a lot of this is copy and pasted from the literature. I'll just go ahead. But essentially, authentic learning is student-focused learning where teachers provide opportunities for students to construct their own knowledge through engaging in self-directed inquiry, problem-solving, critical thinking, and reflections in real-world contexts. So there are 10 elements of authentic learning that we've covered in a paper a couple weeks ago by Herrington and Oliver and Reeves from 2000. And one thing I've learned in my research for addressing this particular topic is that in an authentic activity, not all of the elements that I'm going to mention now have to be accounted for it to be authentic. All right, so now I will cover the 10 different elements, and after each element, I will talk about whether the human-computer interaction case study or the trial case study touched upon this element. All right, so the first and probably most important element of authentic learning is that the activity has real-world relevance and are not just simply classroom-based. So both of them definitely check. All right, the next one is it is an activity that is composed of complex tasks that take a significant amount of time to complete. So I'm not sure about the computer science YouTube video, but I would say it didn't appear to me that, whilst interesting, it didn't appear that it was that complex in terms of time. But the trial, definitely, you could tell there's so much effort that went into that. So that one definitely hit that. Okay, the next element is that the activity encompasses, they have ill-defined problems that require students to define tasks, subtasks, and they could be completed through multiple interactions. Now, both of the case studies covered this. Moving on. The activity provides students the opportunity to collaborate. Again, both case studies covered this because they both worked in groups. Right, okay, so next, the activity provides students the opportunity to examine the problem from different perspectives using a variety of resources. I would say yes, that both case studies, again, did this. Obviously, the trial itself definitely needed to incorporate more formal perspectives, perhaps by collaborating with historians and people who study law or who were actually lawyers, as well as their skills in English. But I also believe that the human-computer interaction, part of the element, I believe, because they weren't allowed to use computers and they had to sort of try to take a different perspective on how they were to present these 8 golden rules for human-computer interaction to the world, if you will, the world of YouTube. Next, it requires students to reflect on their social and individual learning experiences. For both of those, actually, I'm not sure. So, that would be something that the teacher may have asked of the students, but we do not have access to that information. Okay, next. The next element is to require integration of content from several disciplines and lead to outcomes beyond specific learning objectives. So, I believe that the trial fits under this category because there's definitely a lot of interdisciplinary nature within the authentic learning activity. few of these. All right. Okay, so next is the integrative assessment. So the integrative assessment into activities rather than employing external tests in effort to be reflective of similar real-world assessments. So both of these definitely hit this category. So both activities were part of an assessment. And it wasn't just preparation for something else. Okay, next leads to the creation of a polished product with value in its own right, with outside of simply earning a mark. Definitely, both of the case studies actually had, a video that was involved, a trial. People got to act and present who they were to their peers, to their teacher. And it was probably actually really life-changing for a lot of these students to go through, because it didn't say that these students were necessarily theater students. And as well, with the human-computer interaction video, they actually have a video to prove that they've done this, and they can use that later in life to refer to it, maybe potentially in a job or whatever, but it definitely has a polished product. Outside of just earning a number that you just, or a letter that you just put, that you just use to get a job or what have you, or maybe go to graduate school. Okay, so finally, the activity needs to allow for competing solutions and a diversity of outcomes instead of one single correct answer. And I believe both of them definitely, really could have taken different ways. The students could have created a video on human-computer interactions that were very different, and I did see an example that was a very different example, where they just touched upon maybe 2 of the 8 ways that sort of golden rules for human-computer interactions, whereas the video that was in our case study touched upon all 8. In the trial, I guess it just really depends on who they spoke to, how much research they did, what questions the people were asked during the trial. So it's really going to change the actual output. And it was the trial was like a one of situation. I'm not sure if they did like a mock run of the trial to make sure it went smoothly, but I do not know. All right, so oh my goodness, I'm sorry. All right, so another element that I found quite interesting was, besides the fact that you have these elements of authentic learning, there are examples of authentic learning. So they have sort of categories of how these activities could fit under. So I'll just quickly read them off. Well, actually, I'll only read off the ones that we had in the case study. So simulation-based learning, both fell under that category. Student-created media, both of them had that. Inquiry-based learning, definitely the trial had an element of inquiry-based learning. Working with research data, so the trial, they had to research and create, actually probably generate a data set that they would then present. And then a project-based learning experience was, again, the trial. Okay, so that concludes the sort of the preamble of authentic learning and a little intro about the different case studies and how they might gel together. And in the next video, I'll actually go over the online discussion and report back from what the various learners within the group discussion, which is an online discussion, with what people have said.